Hello and welcome to another episode of Terribly Drawn History. Today, we're going to be looking at Jeanne De Clisson, a woman who lived in 14th century France and would be famously known for selling all of her riches in pursuit of revenge for her husband. Although we do not know when exactly Jeanne was born, we do know that she was born in 1300 to a wealthy family in the Vendée region of France. She would marry her first husband very young, but after his tragic death, she would later go on to marry Oliver de Clisson, a French noble who had often fought warring against the English. After a particular siege, in which Oliver, who was defending a city, surrendered to the British, many French nobles began to question his loyalties, especially Charles de Blois, who was very close to the king, and who would begin to plant the seeds of doubt. Oliver, and other nobles, would be given back to the French in a prisoner exchange later that year. This further deepened the thought that he might have forfeited the castle on purpose. The king would invite Oliver and a few Breton nobles to a tournament in Paris. While they were celebrating, the king had them arrested, and after being jailed for several days, they were all executed without trial. Oliver's body was put into a gibbet, and his head sent to Nantes, near Brittany, in order to serve as a warning to other Bretonians. When Jeanne learned of this, she took her two sons to Nantes, where they stood and mourned at their father's decapitated head. It was there that Jeanne swore vengeance, telling her children that King Philip and Charles de Blois were responsible for their father's death. Jeanne returned with her children back to their ownings in Brittany. There, she would sell all of her estates and gather other Bretonians whose kin had been murdered. They made their way to a nearby castle, held by a lord that was quite loyal to the French king. This lord would allow Jeanne to enter, and Jeanne and her loyal followers turned on the garrison once they were all inside, slaughtering all the French troops in the castle except for a few. It was then that Jeanne knew that she did not have enough manpower to withstand the king's forces once they mustered, so she fled with her family to England. Sadly, on the journey, one of her sons fell ill and died. Once she arrived in England, she took the majority of her money and invested into 3 warships, fully equipped for raiding French merchant vessels. Let's pause for a brief moment and discuss early ship combat tactics. In the 14th century, there were almost no cannons, so the main method was boarding and ramming. Sometimes there would be projectiles thrown such as arrows, but naval combat was solely focused on ram and board tactics, drawn here terribly, as you can see. Jeanne would take to the high seas, painting the body of her ships black and the sails red, signaling her intention on this endeavor. Their main and only target would be French merchant vessels, sailing around the English Channel. There she would board merchant ships, killing all except a few, just like the castle incident. Using these survivors to spread the story, she would then allow her crew to keep all the loot, and simply keep what she needed to supply her campaign. Jeanne would begin to dabble in running supplies for the British king to his forces on mainland Europe, as well as raiding many French coastal towns along the way. Overall, Jeanne de Clisson's reign of terror on the Channel would last around 14 years. One of her last encounters would see her flagship, titled My Revenge, badly damaged and sunk, to where she and her sons were adrift for several days, and another son would pass. Jeanne would give up her life of piracy, and although she had finally been defeated, she could have easily raised another fleet, but she no longer sought revenge as she once did. King Philip VI was dead, and she had lost so much. She would go on to marry an English nobleman, and for her services to the crown, she was awarded several pieces of land in English-controlled Brittany, as well as money. Jeanne would retire to a coastal castle, where in 1359 she would die, and although she had not personally attacked Charles Dubois or the king, one could believe she was satisfied, or would be, with what would unfold in the future. Her son, leading an English army, would defeat and kill a French army led by Charles Dubois, finally enacting their revenge. And as a final slap in the face, her descendant, Francis I, would take the French throne in 1515, being the bloodline of the French kingdom until its end. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of Terribly Drawn History. If you liked what we put out, please remember to subscribe. Thank you.